Hello, and welcome back to Rainbow Roundtable. I'm your host, Frank Sanchez, and we're here to delve into a compelling issue facing today's educational landscapes. Misinformation. Specifically, we'll be examining the intersection of misinformation, the teaching of history, and LGBTQ plus issues. We have a remarkable panel of experts, educators, and students who are at the forefront of tackling these challenges.
Why is this so important? We're in an age where information is at our fingertips, but discerning fact from fiction has never been more vital, especially for our educators, who are charged with preparing the next generation to navigate this complex world with critical thinking skills. So let's dive into what's coming up on today's show.
In the first segment, we'll take a journey back in time to understand the roots of misinformation, particularly as it relates to the teaching of history and LGBTQ plus issues. From the erasure of significant LGBTQ plus figures to the denial or revision of key events, this is a new battle. We'll discuss landmark moments that have shaped the trajectory of these issues and provide a historical framework to better understand challenges.
As we move into the heart of our episode, we won't be sharing specific real-world stories, but rather we'll imagine fictional scenarios that represent the very real challenges faced by teachers and students in Florida. Picture this: a classroom where a teacher is wrestling with how to balance state mandates that aim to control information while also providing an accurate and inclusive account of history, or consider students collaborating to question and debunk conspiracy theories, especially those that target the LGBTQ plus community. These imagined yet realistic stories give us a lens through which we can discuss on-the-ground issues educators and students face daily.
In this segment, our panelists will offer concrete tools and strategies to design to counter misinformation and to foster more inclusive educational environment. From role-playing exercises that demystify mechanics of misinformation to using open-source educational materials that provide multiple perspectives, there's a lot to gain here. We'll talk about how these can adapt to address the unique needs and challenges of LGBTQ plus students as well.
As we wrap up, we'll engage in a future-oriented discussion, the issue of misinformation, especially as it impacts the teaching of history and LGBTQ plus issues, isn't going away overnight. But there are glimmers of hope. In this segment, we'll explore possible future scenarios where schools and teachers adapt, policy changes are made, and students become more empowered and discerning consumers of information. Now, to help us understand the complexities of what Florida teachers and students face over LGBTQ plus issues, today we draw on a large variety of talent and experiences and representation. First, this is Frank Sanchez, a teacher and Safe Schools board member. He is my anchor partner today of Safe Schools Rainbow Roundtable. Welcome, Frank.
Hi, Liz. How are you?
Hi, Frank. Good, and you?
I'm good.
Now, let's welcome Vivian Diaz. Vivian is a proud Miami-Dade County Public Schools alumni and mom of two current students. She is deeply involved in school life, dedicated to fostering inclusivity for all. Welcome, Vivian.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me, Frank and Liz. I'm very honored to be here.
We are very happy to have you.
Thank you.
Next, let's add the perspective of a journalist. This is Hatzel Vela, respected Emmy Award-winning journalist at WPLG Television ABC Local 10. He specializes in education, Latin America, and Cuba. In January 2017, Hatzel became the first local television journalist in the country to move to Cuba and cover the island from the inside. Welcome, Hatzel.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Very happy to have you here. Next, welcome the streaming television host, Tiffany Williams. She hosts Tiffany Explains It All for Safe Schools. Welcome, Tiffany.
Hi, Liz. I'm so looking forward to the discussions today.
I am too. So happy to have you, Tiffany. Next, let's welcome Harold Marrero. He is the Chief Operating Officer of Safe Schools and Executive Producer for Safe Schools Rainbow Roundtable. Welcome, Harold.
Hi, Liz and Frank. Thank you for having me on today, and I'm very excited for the conversations that we're going to have.
We're very happy to have you here, Harold. Thank you for everything.
Glad to have you.
Yeah.
And finally, let's welcome Liz Morales. Liz has been an educator for Dade County's public schools for the past 17 years and has served as the GSA sponsor for the past 14 years. Liz is a trombonist, for the South Florida Pride Concert Band, where she has also served as a youth trombone coach. Liz is Vice Chair of Safe Schools South Florida on the Board of Directors and my co-anchor for today's Safe Schools Rainbow Roundtable. Welcome, Liz.
Thank you.
Thank you, panelists, for these fantastic introductions. It is clear that we have a wealth of experience and diverse perspectives here today. Now let's dig into the roots of our topic. On to our historical overview segment. Before we plunge into the depths of today's challenges around misinformation, it's important to understand the context in which these issues have grown. And in order to fully appreciate the context, we need to take a stroll down memory lane.
Misinformation isn't a new phenomenon, especially when it comes to LGBTQ plus issues. The history of misinformation around this particular subject is rich and complicated, dating back centuries and deeply rooted in systematic prejudices and taboos.
For instance, consider the early to mid-20th century. In this period, the so-called Lavender Scare in the United States saw LGBTQ plus people being painted as security risks, a smear that often cost them their jobs and even their homes. Publications from that era often framed being LGBTQ plus as a mental disorder, something that needed to be cured, which we now know is not just incorrect, but damaging.
Fast forward to the AIDS epidemic in the 1980s and 1990s. Misinformation then was rampant. Many people were led to believe that AIDS was a gay disease, stigmatizing a whole community and hampering effective responses to the crisis. In fact, this is used as a way to legitimize discrimination against the LGBTQ plus community. Even schools contributed to this by shying away from inclusive sexual education, fueling ignorance, and consequently prejudice.
We also see history be rewritten to exclude LGBTQ plus figures and contributors. We'd be surprised to find that many students don't learn about the Stonewall riots in their history classes, or about the activism of figures like Marsha P. Johnson or Harvey Milk. Their roles are often sidelined or erased entirely in heteronormative narrative of history.
Understanding this history not only provides us with a clearer picture of where we are today, but also helps us strategize for what lies ahead. If we know how misinformation has been weaponized in the past, especially against marginalized communities like the LGBTQ+, we can be better prepared to fight it in the present.
So let's turn to our panel with a couple of thought-provoking questions. How has historical misinformation around LGBTQ issues impacted our current educational system? And are there specific moments in history that you think are pivotal for our students to know about in order to understand these complexities of misinformation and LGBTQ plus issues? Let's unpack these questions and more. Panel, over to you.
Yeah, well, thank you for all those questions and really guiding us to this topic. And, you know, I remember when I was in school, particularly in high school, we took a lot of history courses and we just learned a lot of information, but rarely did we ever learn about the influence that queer individuals have had on our society, and in society in the West in particular. We learned about Alan Turing, but I had to learn by myself that he was a queer man, and even after he was fundamental in us winning World War II against the Nazis, he wasn't respected, and what happened to him afterwards was really, really sad. So that's something that we didn't learn. I had to learn it by myself, and I wish that more of that was taught in schools. And I never had learned about Harvey Milk in high school. I never learned about Marsha P. Johnson. We didn't learn about the Stonewall riots. I mean, there's a lot of things we didn't learn about.
To piggyback on what he said, because we went to school around the same time, I completely agree with him. I did not know anything about Harvey Milk. I did not know anything about Marsha P. Johnson, the Stonewall riots, until after high school, where I sought out that information for myself to better educate myself around LGBTQ issues, which back when I graduated in 2005, that's when gay marriage was just becoming legal, when these issues were coming just to the forefront, in a more public way, and it was just shocking to me, I felt so ignorant afterwards, wow, there's so much I don't know, even though I have, I graduated from a really good high school. I went to AP history classes, I had really good teachers, but when you're in an AP class, they're teaching for a test. They're not going to be delving into these So it was very, it was a very eye-opening experience for me as a student to like learn, wow, there's so much more that I could have learned and I didn't, and like that I had to seek out that information for myself and become interested and start reading about Harvey Milk's life, and as an example, or Marsha P. Johnson, Stonewall riots, the AIDS epidemic, all these things that the AIDS epidemic happened when as I was a child growing up. There was so much misinformation going on that afterwards, as I grew up, and I was like, wow, that's just not true.
Mm-hmm.
And the effects of the AIDS epidemic, in misinformation lives to this day, where gay men couldn't donate blood because of that misinformation that was going on for so long.
Yeah.
And it's just shocking to me. And like, now that I'm watching my kids grow up in the school system, it's like, is it like I'm taking it as a responsibility of my own to make sure I supplement what they're not being taught in schools so that they don't have that gap in knowledge that I had.
I think you can turn this also into a wider context over civil rights and how civil rights are portrayed in history books, right? And from a journalist perspective, we're having a debate right now about African American history and how that should be taught in schools. And so it's interesting that here we are talking about queer history that's not taught in schools, and we're still struggling about the idea of African American history or how it's taught in schools. I mean, I think that's fascinating, the two side by side, and looking at both of those issues, and the fact that here we are talking about both of them in 2023 is fascinating.
Yeah.
So as a history teacher, and I've been teaching for this is my 28th year. History has always been taught from the perspective of Western European white culture and their contributions. And then as I taught history on this, we went from the minorities, whether it's women, African American, LGBTQ has never been part of it. It was, you would have the regular textbook and there would be a little blurb on the side, and that was the inclusive. We would throw, and like, oh, there's, this minority person, there's this person. And it was just very, that's why they are. We since moved to, we're going to have to include them more. And our history books have not really changed. Our history books do not include other perspectives other than Western white of our founding fathers. Every once in a while, they'll throw somebody in there, but that is not the focus. And I know that we have special months like African American History Month, and we have Women's History Month, and we have Pan-Asian History Month, and we have all these different months. And even then, it's just, all right, we talk about it a little bit, but we are bound by our pacing guides. And our pacing guide says, you have to cover this topic from this day to this day. And then the next, you got to move from this day to this day. So it's very hard to, and they don't tend to focus on the contributions of minorities, even before all this new legislation. So it's just how it's just been. And I think for history to be inclusive and education needs to be inclusive, that needs to happen. In our school, we offer a women's history class because it is not part of the regular curriculum. We offer a Holocaust history class because it's not part of the curriculum. The Holocaust is taught like in a day or two in our classes. So we have these special classes for that. And we don't see African American studies, and we don't see queer studies, we don't see Latino studies as offered in our schools, which is sad.
Yeah. I think I went to school a little later on in life, so I do agree, there was not enough when I was in school of like actually getting to go into like activisms like the Stonewall riots, Marsha P. Johnson, Harvey Milk, all that. But I also agree with Frank that there were just like little snippets, little information, just in case anyone was like actually curious, but it wasn't enough to like actually, again, start up the conversation, dive into that. And I think now more than ever, as a social media person, like TikTok is like the biggest thing. I know everyone's probably heard that before, but like I have seen it where like you will have like Black History Month, Women's History Month, Hispanic History Month, all these like times of the year where like I just see nothing but like my For You page, which is just videos after videos of like different people, activism, artists, and getting to see some of the history. And I'm like, it's so amazing that social media, we use it for like entertainment, but it's can be so informative, even more informative than school to a certain degree, you know? I think it's very upsetting that you have people in these educational systems and also legislation like positions, and they're kind of like just trying to cover up. They're trying to like erase all these minorities, all these other people that it wasn't all this pretty picture. And I think people don't want to listen to what the real history was because it makes them feel uncomfortable. And it's like, but that should empower you to change so that we don't go back, so that we don't keep making the same mistakes. And hence the phrase of, you know, you have to know your history so you don't repeat history.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I remember that I learned about grid, that AIDS was originally called grid from Grey's Anatomy. Watching when they went back in time, an episode went back in time, and they were talking about it, and I'm like, what is grid? I thought it was something they made up for the show, so I looked it up, and there you have it, gay-related immunodeficiency disease, or I think that's how it laid out. And I was shocked that they call it grid, and I didn't learn that in high school. I mean, like Vivian was saying, we are children of the 80s, so we grew up with it, and I mean, I can tell you, I can write a book on the misinformation that my parents gave me about AIDS. You know, like the moment that you came out, you were gonna just get AIDS. So there was no even HIV. It's just like you come out of the closet, you have AIDS. That was it. And then you die before 30. That's what I was told. And that was, obviously it's not true. And it's something that, you know, it had to have come from, and also ER. ER did a bunch of episodes relating to AIDS, and one of the main characters gets HIV, and then she's put on the medication, and she was a straight woman. You know, she got it from her husband, who was a drug user. So it changed the narrative. Here you have a main character that's not gay, that's not, you know, that poor sob story that we always saw, and that changed the narrative. It made me less afraid of HIV because I was seeing it play out in a show. So yeah, I wish the schools would have taught me this. I wish that, you know, this would have been done in a different way, but I had to have learned it from TV.
And the problem is that if it's not taught in school, it's taught somewhere, because you brought up the TikTok thing, right? So TikTok is very useful in a lot of ways, right? Because kids can learn so much, but at the same time, there's so much misinformation in social media, whether it's TikTok or Instagram. And kids do not know the process of what it's like to sort of take some information and then make sure that it's accurate and correct. And so what you have is, yes, there's a lot of good information out there, but how do you know it's true or not? And that's where sort of the classroom comes in, because that's where teachers can really curate and figure out and tell them, hey, this is what the facts are, and this is how we're going to teach it. And this is real. This is the real world.
And sometimes kids have questions and we can't answer them because we can't discuss that in our classrooms.
That's right.
I teach reading, and we have to have our books scanned. So I used to have a library with a lot of books, like hundreds of books. So now, since we have an independent section of our program, the ones that we use, it has to be those specific books. But sometimes the kids are like, oh, can I read this book? And I'm like, no, you can't. You have to use the ones that are there. You know, so it's kind of sad, that are approved.
It's unfortunate that it's come to this point, and you know, it was interesting what you were saying earlier about the parallel between the whole African American history thing. Were any of us taught about the Tulsa riots?
Nope.
Were any of us taught about, like, did we know anything? When did this all start coming? That really started making it when Watchmen came out.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Yeah, so
I learned about the Tulsa riots through Watchmen.
Exactly. And it's like a part of me is like, wow, I'm glad that this came out, but another part of me is like, man, I'm in my 30s, and this is when I'm learning about such pivotal moments in our history. And it's like, if that's being erased, how much more? And what can we do to combat that? Because it starts in the schools, but then, I mean, my parents are immigrants. They wouldn't know about any of that. So, like, you know, it starts, like, now with my children, I know that I have to kind of supplement that. But, you know, it's just really unfortunate that it's come to this point where, you know, we can't have these open and having these lessons that enrich. It won't take away anything. The white heteronormative Western perspective can't be the only one that's being taught. You know, and to me, it's very important that that, you know, we try to find a way to fight back and like make sure that we are inclusive to everyone to
Yeah.
make sure it's being
So
taught.
does it start in the home and in the classroom? Where does that activism, as a journalist, where does that activism start?
I think there's to me, I see it that they both kind of peak together at some point. I think it does take a lot of like introspection, not just from the parents, but also like from the teachers. Because there are teachers that aren't part of like those certain communities, but they can be allies. And how do you become an ally? How do you help these people? And talking about these subject matters that are happening, that did happen, in a way that you're not going to get in trouble. Unfortunately, that's where we're at now. It didn't used to be that way. But the fact that now it's like, okay, I have to talk about this in a certain aspect. And there are parents. I mean, it's good to see that there are parents that are allies and that are willing to, put themselves in the student position with their own kids of like, okay, well, if this is what you're covering, let me also look up, let me look online, educate myself a little bit, and maybe even have a conversation with your student's teacher, and kind of being like, well, this is what I want. And if it's a parent and a teacher talking together, I feel like there's more room to talk about than versus with a minor or student.
Yeah.
I think one of the issues of parents' lack of information is at least in my school, a lot of parents are not from this country.
Yep.
So they don't know this country's history because they came as adults, so they did not go to the educational system in our country. So they will never know about the Tulsa or the Rosewood or Marsha P. Johnson or any of these people because that's not what they grew up with. So when their child comes home to like, I don't know. So it would be up to the parent to educate themselves. But parents are busy. Parents have lives.
Yes.
Parents have to take care of this. And to add this other thing for them to do, it's nice, but I don't know how realistic it would be because parents have to work and then they have to come home, take care of the kids and help with homework and clean the house and all that stuff. And I don't know how realistic it would be for parents to do. And it's not that they're not well-meaning. It's not that they don't want to. It's just
it's definitely from a place of being able to do so, having the resources to be able to do so, being able to discern misinformation to make sure that my child gets accurate information. It's definitely from a place of like, I'm able to do this for my child. I know that not every parent has the ability to do that. Whether it be because of time constraints, because they have to work, because they have other children that need to be taken care of. So there's a multitude of things I can say from my perspective, what I'm personally doing with my two kids. But definitely I know it's from a place of my own privilege that I'm able to do that for them.
And I do feel like teachers, and we have teachers here today, but teachers are at the front lines of this, and teachers are the gatekeepers of this information. And yes, right now there is the government, government policies, and Tallahassee is utilizing its tools to try to keep things out of history, change history a little bit to favor the oppressors, and banning books that you all now have to really look at and find creative solutions for this. And I don't know what those are. I'm just talking right now in this space, but there has to be a way that we can creatively resist and kind of gear the students that want to learn. Because let's face it, there will be students that just want to go through it and that's just what they're going to do. I mean, I was one of those kids that I wanted to learn. So if a teacher would have given me like a book that said, hey, you should read this, like this is good for you to read, I would have read it and I would have been the better for it. And in my life in particular, teachers were the ones that constantly saved me throughout the school system when I was in school, because my parents just come from Cuba. They had no idea what they were doing. Like, they didn't know the system, and I had to fend for myself, but I had teachers that constantly got in the way to protect me and to move me to certain places that I need to move. So that's why I feel like teachers have so much power and so much capacity for goodness. I just don't, in this stage where we are in this country, I don't want them to get in trouble, but at the same time, I want to see if there are creative solutions for this.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I mean, they say all politics is local, right? So where do you start? You start at the local level, at the school district level, and so because they obviously, while they cannot say what goes into the classroom in terms of what books, because that's set by the state, from what I understand. The district does have some flexibility in how they teach and what courses they teach, and I believe that that's where you start at the
Right.
school district. Specifically, when you have school districts in Miami-Dade or Broward, they have to think about their audience and who their audience is, and what kind of population lives in these neighborhoods that would be get advantage over having certain material and certain books. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So maybe you start there, but how does it translate into Tallahassee? That's
Right.
That's the disconnect, it seems.
So like I said, I personally teach a class that's half a year of Holocaust studies and half a year is women history, and that's it's not taught in every school. It's just taught in my school. And other schools can offer that, but you need someone who's willing to take that on, and that is a course that is approved by the district, which has to be approved by Tallahassee, and I have a lot of freedom to cover things in those classes, and I go deeply into the Holocaust, and I go deeply into the issues of women's history. But no one ever talks about queer history. And we don't talk about queer history because, one, we don't have a lot of teachers who are out. It was, teachers being out back in the day would mean you would lose your job.
Right.
So people would not be comfortable being out. I'm an out, gay man. I sponsor the GSA at my club. My students know that I am gay and have a relationship. It's not something I discuss in my classroom because it's not really part of history. It's not part of stuff. But we don't have people fighting to teach queer history. We don't have that representation. So it's not pushed for. It's not pushed for in the district. It's not pushed for in Tallahassee. And if we want to be inclusive, we need to start pushing it because it's not going to be in the history books. Even before everything, don't say gay or any other stuff, we were never part of the conversation.
Right.
And we started to be part of the conversation, but we're only part of the conversation a little bit. We need, with Don't Say Gay, it makes it a lot harder to start that conversation and be part of that conversation. And one of the ways I see it fixing is voting.
Yeah.
Voting. It's just voting. So,
Oh,
no. Anybody else have anything
No.
on the
No.
contribute?
Yeah, I think we're.
All right. So,
Wow, what a thorough walk down memory lane and a great discussion. Thank you, panelists, for helping us understand the historical complexity surrounding our topic today. Now, let's move from the past into the pressing present issues in our real life experiences segment.
thank you for that enlightening historical overview. Now let's bring in the issues closer to home and consider how misinformation around LGBTQ plus students issues play out in our day-to-day lives, particularly in educational settings.
For the purpose of today's discussion, let's imagine we're in a classroom in Florida, a state where the educational system is grappling with how history is taught, especially when it comes to LGBTQ plus issues. Think of a fictional high school where a group of students discover that a key LGBTQ plus figure like Harvey Milk is conspicuously absent from their history books. In another classroom, let's imagine a teacher striving to discuss the impact of LGBTQ plus folks in politics, but being constrained by state guidelines that discourage or outright ban the discussion of LGBTQ plus experiences in a favorable light.
And it's not just history classes. Think about sex education as well. Students in our imagined school may be subjected to a curriculum that erases the experiences and needs of the LGBTQ plus youth, providing no information on safe sex practices or sexual orientation. Here, misinformation becomes a sin of omission and impacts that can be dangerous, leaving students uninformed and unsupported.
In these fictional, but unfortunately plausible scenarios, how do students and teachers navigate the minefield? Perhaps our teacher, bound by the limitations of state syllabus, employs creativity, encouraging students to independently research and present on LGBTQ plus figures. Meanwhile, the students form an underground history club that examines the topics the school won't cover, disseminating their findings through art, signs, or social media. They may use technology to create safe spaces for discussion and work collectively to question conspiracy theories and misinformation in general about LGBTQ plus topics.
This creative resilience in the face of systemic barriers serves as a testament to the indomitable spirit of inquiry and truth-seeking that educational should foster, while specific fictional and struggle is real for many across the nation. So panelists, let's consider, what are some of the ways teachers can still foster inclusive and accurate understanding of LGBTQ history and issues when the educational system may discourage it? How can students themselves become agents of change, challenging the status quo and misinformation regarding LGBTQ plus topics? I can't wait to hear your insights on these deeply important issues over to our panel.
I can say, I'm sorry. I have a very good friend of mine who is a teacher, and they were talking to me about this history because I reached out to them and I was like, I just want to know what you do in your classroom to make sure, because they're a high school teacher. And they were telling me that one of the strategies that they use is that they personally cannot use preferred pronouns, but they will not and will let the students, that doesn't affect the students being able to call themselves by their own pronouns. So that's something that's actively encouraged in their classroom. They actively discourage using specific pronouns or calling students by whatever their assigned name is. Just say things like "great job," and calling not calling students individually, so that, to avoid having to perhaps dead name a student or refer them by their non-preferred pronouns. And they'll let their students use their preferred name on any assignment or stickers or anything like that. Just tiny little acts to make sure that these students know that they can feel comfortable in their classroom. Something as simple as putting a sticker somewhere subtle, putting a magnet so that they know that they are in an environment with someone that will, help them, that will nurture them, that will, make sure that they have a safe space. So I think, and I leave it over to you two, since you two are the ones on the front line, and and you speak to a lot of educational.
I think at the basis of it is clubs and the ability to form clubs and to organize. From what I understand, that's still federally protected in schools, and so that I think is key because students can really associate with people who they have similar beliefs with, whatever the issue is, whether it's queer rights or anything else that Hispanic heritage or whatever it is. I think that's key. I remember back to when I was in high school, student government was a key at my high school at Core Park. And I think it fostered this ability for all of us to sort of come together, no matter what your background is, and to have a dialogue about your backgrounds, about your sexual orientation, about different things that were affecting us as kids. I think that's still the case. And hopefully, I think it continues to foster the ability for kids in the classroom to express themselves.
Yeah, and one of the issues that we're facing right now is that the state is passing laws that are requiring kids to have permission slips for them to take home in order to join certain after-school clubs, which we know what they're doing. They're doing it because they don't want, they want the kids to go home and I want to join GSA. It's like, well, what's GSA? Gay Straight Alliance. It's like, why do you want to join Gay Straight Alliance? Like, parents will usually just ignore what the straight and just look at the gay. But the way that I look at it from a different perspective. When I also went to Core Park, and there's 4 Core Park people here in this room right now. So that's a lot of go Rams. From when I was at Core Park, one of the clubs that I joined was the Bible Club. And I remember that there were people in the Bible Club that came from houses that were not religious. That one of the people that I was with came from an atheist household. And I just think about that person having to go home and give a permission slip saying, I want to join the Bible Club. And it's like, why do they have to do that? It's an after-school club run by students with the support of a teacher. Like, how that infringes on their right to do something when it comes to their religion. So it goes into their religious freedom. So everybody talking about parental rights and looking at the queer element, but there are all these other elements that they're ignoring, and this law just really impedes students from being their true self, their authentic selves in the schools, and I find that really problematic.
So So because the Bible Club is allowed, gay straight alliances are allowed.
Right.
They're federally protected programs. And I think that is one way that students can use and teachers can use to get information out about queer history and about what is going on. Because these are extracurricular clubs. So they don't fall under the educational setting. So as a teacher, I cannot talk about Harvey Milk or Sylvia Rivera or Marsha P. Washington or any of the, Johnson, sorry, or any of our other queer heroes. But through the GSA, they can do that. We can do that. And we can have different activities and we can discuss those topics in that club. So that's one way that you can do it, but then that would mean that the student feels comfortable enough to join the club.
Right.
Yeah.
And not every student is ready to come out or ready to participate in the club. So then those that are not ready miss out on that history.
Yeah.
And that's a shame.
Yeah, I mean, I was one of those. I remember going by your class and looking in, just like, like, what are they doing? What is the GSA doing? I want to be part of that, but I wasn't out in high school, so it was really hard for me. And I know that there was the straight element to it, but I just felt like if I were to join, a GSA, my friends would be like, why are you joining GSA? And I just didn't want to deal with that. But that's totally true. Kids that don't join are missing out on a lot of information. And particularly, I want to talk about a little bit about the sexual education in high school, because we had some of that. I remember we used to be taken to the auditorium, right?
Yes.
And they used to give this presentation.
They gave a presentation in the auditorium, and then we had also I think a health class.
Health class, yes, with Mr.
Well,
yeah.
I know that, I don't know if it's still there, but we used to have to give 5 hours of AIDS and HIV education to our students, so they would know, and it would be very basic stuff. We would talk about ways to prevent it, how do you get it, to counteract all those misinformation that was happening in the 80s. So like in the 90s and 2000s, this was the thing. This was passed by the district. They gave us a curriculum and they said, hey, you can do this. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, sex education is really not a thing. And whenever we did have sex education, queer sex was not.
No,
it was always heteronormative perspective, and it was never talked about that, even though the people who were mostly affected by the HIV and AIDS epidemic were the gay kids.
And I remember all of these misinformation that was happening, even in our high schools, that all of a sudden, Braddock was the school with the most HIV cases.
Oh, yes.
And that was and people in corporate were like, oh my gosh, Braddock has the most HIV cases. Yeah. And you would just hear these crazy claims.
Stories, and you wouldn't even know where they came from. It was just all these rumors spreading like wildfire. And all you could do was just be like, I mean, that sounds weird, but what way do you have to verify any of that?
There was all rumors. There was no data.
Right.
How many kids in high school have HIV and what? So there was never that. But it's just misinformation and all that.
Just fear mongering, so that people would be scared of oh my God, all those kids and it was just so looking back, it was so absurd. And I remember when I was in the newspaper in my school. And I wrote an op-ed back in 2003, my junior year of high school, about in support of gay marriage, and that was a huge thing that I wrote in the opinion, and I have it to this day. And I mean, and just to have, and the thing that makes me sad now is that I don't think a kid would feel comfortable doing that in a high school today.
Yeah.
That they wouldn't feel comfortable. Not maybe the newspaper doesn't exist anymore, but to put themselves out there in some sort of in a media thing, the TV or the channels that you would have to get the news, or the newspaper that we would have an opinion page. That's what breaks my heart, that back in 2003, I felt confident and comfortable enough to do something like that, but I don't feel like there would be that same level of ability for a kid today to do it, because they would have that fear mongering that's gotten worse instead of getting better, Yeah,
we were doing such crazy things in the newspaper, because I was in the newspaper with Vivian. I remember we had a test whether you were metrosexual or not.
Yes.
And that was so wild. And I took the newspaper home I was working on it, so I took it home. And my dad saw it and he's like, what is this? What is this gay stuff? I'm like, metrosexual is not gay. Like, it just means that you're a straight guy that likes to like look good. It's gay light. Yeah, it's gay light.
Diet gay.
But it was such a wild time to have grown up in that time that we were just allowed to write whatever we wanted and explore whatever we wanted. And of course, our teachers were really like strict on us and fact checking us. I once did I got a quote from Kate Beckinsale, which was the actress, and I got a quote from my friend, but he didn't really say the quote. It's just my friend said the quote, and Miss Moeller came down on me. She's like, he didn't say this. I went to ask him. She said, did you say this quote? And he's like, no. She's like, so then I got in trouble. So she's like, you can't write for the next like month or so. I'm like,
you're
banned.
You're banned.
Yeah. I mean, hearing these stories, and it's just like, again, different time periods. Because when gay marriage was legalized in the U.S. is around the time that I was finishing high school. So it's really interesting. Yes, there is not as much like freedom of like expression or like getting to just openly talk about stuff. But because of that, the internet kind of like changed that because people started becoming more conservative about certain topics. So then if you weren't talking about it at school, you could talk about it online in group and live chats or Discords. And now we're at a point where we're trying to like bring back those discussions in person in the classrooms, and we're trying to like, not right wrongs, but like basically being like, okay, we're now like this veil that people wanted to put over the subject, and now we're trying to take the veil off, and people who don't want the veil to be lifted, they're like, no, you shouldn't know about this. But it's like, knowledge is so powerful, and it's like, wouldn't you want to know all these things so that you can make a better future for yourself and for the people that haven't even come like before you? It's just like, it's really fascinating because it's like, I hear about things that happened in the early 2000s, and I'm like, I was too young to experience any of that. But being a teenager in the 2010s, it's like I got to see like that transition of like the internet. I grew up with the internet, and it's really fascinating because I hear a lot of older generations be like, oh, but social media, like there's a lot of like, yes, I do agree that there can be a lot of misinformation online, of course. But look how many books have misinformation? How many books have been like written by people who were just like totally just changing the narrative completely? And it's like, that wasn't actually factual. Like that never happened. Mm-hmm. Or people just basically saying like, finding out like informations that like during the Holocaust, like a lot of educational books on gay rights, trans, like Germany was such a hub center at the time before all that happened for queer people. And then all these books that were written during that time all got destroyed because of one person basically saying like, I don't want to talk about this, and so I'm going to just erase it. And I know a lot of younger people that are like, I wish we had those like access to those books. It's like, but we do, because we have the people that actually survived and get to talk and like, express like what they went through and basically their experiences. And it's like, I feel like a lot of people see social media and it's either like you're all the way in or you're kind of like, oh, I don't really know. Like, I don't really agree with that. But it's like, that's where we have now more of an open discussion online. Yeah. And especially with GSA clubs, like, again, I do understand there are some students that, do want to come out, but they can't. Maybe they're in situations where they can't, do those type of things. But you have a group of kids that maybe are a part of GSA, and maybe they can create an online like chat room, and then that will encourage the ones who are, not coming out, but they know that there's a safe space where they could express their, opinions and what they're going through, because it's a different perspective, but they're still part of like that group,
a small community.
Yeah, a small community.
It starts small and it can just get bigger and bigger. That's all we can hope for.
We talk about creative ways to include ourselves. Recently, the Miami-Dade County School Board voted no on teaching or including LGBTQ history in recognizing October as LGBTQ History Awareness Month. So one of the things before, they would, every year it was passed. It was passed without a problem. It was great. And then they would send us a list of 30 queer heroes to highlight. And, I, as the GSA sponsor, I would assign want to teach my kids, and then it would be kind of read in the morning, how this is a queer hero for today, and they would read the person's biography. Well, we can't no longer do it on the news, but the kids will still do the queer history, and we'll just put it on a bulletin board, and so it's there. It's just not as loud as it used to be, and that's where we're stuck at now.
Yeah, it's like the bare minimum. Just like it's there. They can go see it.
So
but
the students can go and they can check out the queer history person of the day, but that's it. And it's sad, but at least we're there, and it's just sad. That's where we're at. We used to have a very supportive school board where some of the members that were voting yes are now voting no.
Yeah.
And it's all because of what's happening in Tallahassee.
Yeah.
And teachers are afraid to, a lot of teachers are afraid to go against grade because it's their job.
Right.
So.
Sorry.
No, go for it.
It's sad because I'm a GSA sponsor, and I see the kids, they're scared. They're scared to join the club. That's why, like, the first day of school, I'm like, this is a safe space. And I introduce myself as their teacher, but also as the Gay Straight Alliance sponsor and the Future Educators of America. So I have two different clubs, and they're like, did you say gay? I'm like, I sure did. I said straight. So I invite them to join, like, to earn community service hours and also to learn. But I obviously can't talk about that in class.
yeah.
So
And
what grade
that's
level is this?
I teach 9th grade now.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I have, yes, and then I can tell, I'm not judging my students, but I can tell that they're like super excited, the ones that are like, oh my God, she's a GSA sponsor, so they feel better. And I invite everybody to the meeting, so then we have Club Rush coming up next week. That's when kids start signing up. I'm like, if you guys are interested, sign up during lunchtime. And then when Frank just said that, like, at least there's a little corner of where people learn about the history, but it's sad that it's just that they can go there, because in my school, it was the same thing. They would announce it, they would have like at least a little bio, paragraph, information, whatever, but now like you can't
Have you
do
seen
that.
interest wane in terms of people wanting to join GSA?
Some kids, but then there's kids have approached me like, oh, this kid is scared to join. I'm like, don't tell him not to be scared. Just sign up next week, So we'll see. I mean, when we meet again, I guess we can discuss that because I won't know until.
But you haven't seen membership drop in the past 2
A lot of
years.
my kids have graduated, and then after the Don't Say Gay bill, kids stopped showing up. To tell you the truth.
I haven't. Like my school has always had a very. I've been sponsored since almost 20 years, and we were a very small club. Like there were this many people in the club 20 years ago, and now my club had about 40, 50 kids in the club, and it was great and wonderful.
It's Coral Park.
Coral Park is
always been very gay, Coral Park. Yeah.
and we participated in the walkout right before the vote for Don't Say Gay bill. We had a walkout. It was supported by administration, and it was and it was great. I haven't seen. Last year there wasn't a big drop. We'll see this year what happens. I mean, I'm not expecting it, but I'll find out because we also have Club Rush in the next couple of weeks. And to be clear, the club is just a safe space for kids to hang out. And we do a lot of community service. We participate in suicide awareness walks. We participate in breast cancer walks. We do toy drives. We do all these community services. So it's not like we're sitting there and always talking about gay issues and what are you doing? And we're not like discussing, anything that's inappropriate. It's a school, but it's there for a place to gather and for like-minded kids to feel like, okay, this is my family. This is my little, flock of brothers stick together. Okay, I feel safe here. And that's what GSA means in my school at Coral Park. It's just anybody's welcome. Anybody's welcome, and we don't. I never ask. Like, are you gay? Are you straight? Bisexual? Are you pan? It's just like you're here. Great, thanks. Just come on.
You mean you're not pushing the gay agenda on the whole school?
I have enough toasters.
Okay.
So I don't need any more recruits.
Got it.
And I want to thank both of you for making me feel old. I graduated in 2005 and 2005. I was a sponsor there, and so thanks.
Well, you made an impact because I've always remembered you.
Well, thank you. Yes. So, go for it.
Incredible stories and insights, everyone. It's stories like these that really bring home the immediate need for action and understanding. With that, let's transition into how we can equip ourselves better. Time for our tools and resources segment.
Now that we've delved into the historical landscape and imagined a real-life hurdles students that teachers may face, let's pivot to something incredibly important: solutions. What can we actually do to combat misinformation, especially when it comes to LGBTQ issues in our schools?
Imagine our fictional teacher in Florida, bound by the limitations of what can and cannot be openly taught about LGBTQ plus history and issues. How can they circumvent the roadblocks? One way could be the inclusion of alternative reading lists that provide students with the resources to investigate LGBTQ plus figures, events, and concepts on their own. Websites, podcasts, and documentaries could also be solely recommended.
For those who are comfortable with technology, there's apps and platforms that allow for anonymous Q&A sessions. These schools can empower students to ask questions they may feel hesitant to ask openly, facilitating more honest discussion around the LGBTQ topics.
And let's not underestimate the power of role-playing exercises to create empathy and understanding. Our imagined teacher might enact scenarios that shed light on the creation and spread misinformation. For example, they could role-play a social media scenario where a false narrative about an LGBTQ plus issue is circulated. Then have the students dissect what went wrong and how it could be rectified.
Now let's consider students who want to take matters into their own hands. Students-led initiatives can make a big difference. Imagine our group of students starting a school club focused on media literacy and critical thinking. They could also invite guest speakers, organize workshops, and collaborate with LGBTQ plus organizations to provide authentic learning experiences.
Lastly, there are countless external resources, websites like the Trevor Project or GLSEN, Gay and Lesbian and Straight Education Network. And Safe Schools' own website offers toolkits for both educators and students to create more inclusive environments and tackle misinformation effectively.
The goal is to empower. These tools and resources can transform passive consumers of information into active seekers of truth, particularly in matters affecting the LGBTQ community. So panelists, this leads me to ask, are there special tools or specific methods found and particularly effective in addressing LGBTQ misinformation in schools? How can schools and educators partner with external LGBTQ plus organizations to enrich their toolkits in combating misinformation? I'm eager to hear your thoughts and experiences. Panel, your turn.
I do have one question, if I could ask, about, because you two teach high school.
Yes.
Any sort of lessons that were being taught, like where you were saying that they would be teaching every single day a different gay historical figure, it wouldn't affect middle school or elementary school kids because they wouldn't necessarily do anything like that?
Well, so to be clear, we never taught it in class. So
Okay.
when those LGBTQ heroes were presented, it was something that was read over the morning announcements.
Okay.
So it wasn't like we're going, because as an American history teacher, I have my pacing guides, and I said before, we have things to cover because we have to get the kids ready for the EOC exam. So we don't have a lot of time to go into topics a lot. So a lot of history is very like that. Before we had the EOC exam, which is end of course exam, which is 30% of the students' grade, I had more freedom to okay, the kids are interested in this topic. I can spend an extra day in this topic and get more deep into it. Now it's kind of, I gotta hit my timeline. So we never had time to teach, queer history or African American history. So even African American History Month or Women's History Month, it was very much maybe a homework assignment or very much a extracurricular thing or something with the club. The class itself does not allow for in-depth stuff. We cover a lot of stuff and we cover things thoroughly, but if we take too long, then we get behind. So we can't. And as far as middle schools, that before they stopped supporting it, that was put out to everybody, middle schools and elementary schools, and the teachers did what they wanted to. Now, there are no GSAs, or there were never GSAs in elementary schools. We had some middle schools that had some GSAs. Not a lot of schools had GSAs, but there were some. and they were starting to because the society was a little, or the school board was a little more supportive, or the laws weren't there to prevent it. So they were we were moving down into it because we saw more and more kids come out earlier. So there was a need. And now I don't think there is
a need.
No, not that there's a need.
I mean, that there is not
allowed.
Allowed, yes.
So I'm not sure what goes on in middle school now because I don't have that perspective.
Yeah.
But I know that we had.
I was saying, as a perspective, both of my children are in elementary school, so a lot of misinformation was being put out there, especially when it came to the LGBTQ, recognizing October as that month, because they were like, well, they're going to be taught, or the lesson plans are going to change, or this is going to happen, and it's like, there is so much misinformation by just simply saying, let's recognize that there are gay kids that are in Miami-Dade County Public Schools. That's literally all we're trying to do.
Right.
That's it. And there's so much, and there were so many things flying around, like they're going to change lesson plans. They're going to make teachers teach this, do this. And it's like, those are the things that we need to start combating from like in a local, hyper local level, because there's just so much that they just assume because of all these loud voices that are drowning out the voices, our voices. They're being louder and saying, well, they're trying to indoctrinate your kids and trying to do this. And they're listening to them without discerning and without looking and being like, wait, no, this is just recognizing that this happened.
Yeah, what I was going to add from a journalist perspective is that that's what we saw recently when they voted this down. We saw a lot of misinformation. And what we've seen is sort of the political organization of different groups who send out messages that some argue purposely mislead. Specifically, we've had this conversation here, the parents who are too busy to really engage, or parents who come from minority backgrounds or working class who don't know what's really happening, and when they see something being sent saying, now they're going to change what your kids are learning and your kids are going to be learning this, of course they freak out, and of course they're going to come to the district and spout. You could hear it when you listen to the meeting. You can hear people say things that you're like, wait a minute, where did you get that information? Because that's not even what the proposal says. It's not saying anything about curriculum, but yet they're being told something by possibly some organized means. So that they can come out there and really, it's really fear, some say.
Yeah, and my favorite part is when they talk about, they don't want their kids learning about sex. And it's like, no one is teaching your kids about sex when they talk about Langston Hughes or Alan Turing or Marsha P. Johnson or, all these other gay heroes, queer heroes.
We're just saying we exist.
Yeah, we exist. No, there's no talk about genitalia. There's no talk about, positions. There's no talk about any of that. And and it's all about fear. It's just for some reason, the people that have the biggest issue with it are people that can't separate the person who is queer from the act of sex. And they're overly focused on the sex and not focused at all on the person and the individual. And that's on them. Like, there's something happening in them that's on them.
I think that's part of what has always happened with the LGBTQ community. We've always been sexualized. We've always been like, we're not people. We're people who have sex, and we're always focused on what happens in the bedroom. We don't focus that, hey, I have a house, I have a kid, I have a mortgage, I have a job, I have this, I'm tired, I want to go to bed. And all any of that. They focus on, what's happening in the bedroom, who's doing what to who, and all stuff. And it's like, that's not,
that's not none of your business. No one's going to your house asking you, like, can I see your bedroom, please? Like, no one is doing that.
I mean, it's a beautiful bedroom, but not.
I think, but it goes back to the AIDS epidemic, because that's where you mostly hear it, especially from older generations, like my parents' generation, because in the during the 80s, AIDS was crazy, is because people were having all this sex, and I was just like, you can do that with any other thing like that. Like, why are you singling out a group of people, and then you're making that association again that gay people only do is sex, that's all they want to focus on? And it's like, no, they're people just like you and me. We like the same things. We could like the same TV shows, be in the same political party. It's just like, again, people focusing on the wrong thing. And you see it all the time online.
I think they use that to scare people, to scare parents. Because parents, let's face it, parents and the talk is very like, I don't want to have it.
It's awkward.
It's awkward. So having that conversation, so it's like, oh, gay gay sex. I don't want to have that. I don't want to
Yeah.
talk about it. My kids are going to ask me questions. What does this mean? What does that mean? And as a parent, you get that question.
Yeah.
And you would know better how to answer it than I do.
I mean, well, my daughter is 9 years old, so we obviously haven't had the big talk yet. But she, I have gay friends. I have, she has friends whose parents are gay. So she's been exposed to it, and it's never been like she's grown up with it. Like we've made it normal for her. Like we've never been like othering or saying, well, they're gay. Like no. Everyone is who they are. We love them regardless. I mean, just because of who they are. We just want, we want everyone to feel safe and comfortable and not feel like we're ever judging them, because why? Why would you judge people for who they love or who they choose to identify? It's just like, it's for me, like I've always taught her, everyone is deserving of understanding and love, regardless of whatever you might think. Oh, look, they look a little weird. Their hair is acting a little weird. Oh, I don't like the way that they laugh. Or no, like we give everybody a chance, and then I've normalized that with my daughter, where, we talk about those things, and she's, up to the point where it's age appropriate for her. I feel very comfortable answering any of her questions, you know?
And that's the thing, age appropriate. And everybody thinks that, because we're including this, we're going to talk about inappropriate things with elementary schools. And we would never talk about, like if we were, I go back to the Holocaust because I teach it. If I were to teach the Holocaust to high school kids, it would be very different how I teach the Holocaust to elementary school kids. Right. I wouldn't go into all the details, and I wouldn't show all the pictures that I would show, because they're young and they're little, and you want to give them information, but you don't want to scare them, or you don't want to, I don't know what the word
traumatize
them. And you would give more information in middle school. You give more information in high school, because these kids can handle the information.
As they get older, you evolve.
So the idea of what's my kid going to learn? They're going to learn what's appropriate in their thing. And
guess what? They're going to learn it anyway.
Oh, yes, exactly. Exactly.
Whether you want to or not, right? It's all out there.
Yeah,
I'll tell you. My parents didn't give me to talk about sex. I found out from looking it up in an encyclopedia.
Yeah.
Okay. So like
that's old school.
That's really old school. Now this exists. But back then I had like a Spanish English like encyclopedia, and I was like looking. I was like, wait, what the hell is that?
That was not in my Encyclopedia Britannica.
I didn't see that either.
Yeah. Mine was National Geographic. I was like looking at National Geographic. They went to Japan, and I'm like, oh, why? What's happening in Japan? Like, that's very interesting. But let me ask you a question. Is Coral Park still doing freshman orientation? Because when I was in Coral Park, we had this one class, and I still, I remember this teacher was amazing. I love this teacher to death. And that class, I just remember it was a class that we went to, and all we did was watch movies, like historical movies about that made us think, and then we'll write about it, and then we also cover a bunch of different things. That's when I had a little bit of sex ed, was in this freshman orientation course, and it changed throughout the year. And I feel like that was a really cool way, because I was introduced to a lot of things. I mean, they played the band, the band played on, and that's when I was like, whoa! Like I had no idea this was happening. And they played it for us in the class, and that began my interest in learning more about it, because I was coming from the perspective of my parents that this was a death sentence, that this was horrible, that whatever misinformation I came in with there, I left that class with a different perspective, and one that led me to explore more. But we also saw the Dead Poet Society. We saw Rudy, and then we would talk about it. So it was watching the movie, and then we had discussions. But in the discussions, we were able to build empathy for the different subjects that we were learning from in these movies. So I wonder if that's still around.
We do have a freshman experience class, but it's not. I don't teach the class, but it doesn't really cover any of that. It's more like, hey, this is high school, and this is how you good study habits, and this is how that stuff. I don't think they cover. That type of stuff. I don't think sex ed is really pushed or covered in depth in schools anymore. I think people have shied away. We used to have clubs that focused on on the HIV/AIDS issue to bring out information, and they would go to classrooms and have, it was student-led, and the students would go to the classroom and they would kind of do a presentation to the class. And they
Isn't
would,
that the hip?
Yep.
Oh, they do HIP, but I don't know if they cover that in HIP. But I know the students would go and they'll be trained, and then they'll go from the training, and then the students would give the trainings to the different classes and say, this is what you do, and this is how you prevent it, and this is how you catch it, and to get rid of that. We don't do that so much anymore, just because I think two reasons. One, AIDS is not a big news anymore. HIV and AIDS is not big in the media today. It's like, it used to be like, oh, this is there. Everybody was wearing the little red ribbon, and now like you don't see that. And the other reason, I think people are just always, not comfortable talking about sex.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And going back to what you were saying earlier about like, unfortunately, it is true that if you don't want to talk about it, your kid's going to learn it somewhere else. And I know it's an awkward conversation. Nobody really wants to talk about it because it's just like, you don't want to think about it because if I'm telling you how this kind of works, then you're like, as they get older, they have a partner and you're like, I know what you do. Like, we don't want to think about that. It's like if you think about your parents, you know they do it, but you don't want to know how they do it, So, but it's just like, I think, again, what you were saying is just making it normal, like, yes, this is what happens. These are the things, like, it's okay. And I think, again, it's just, there's so much like around like shaming you about being in your own body or liking something that you like. And it may not be the same as somebody else, but also giving you like the tools of being like, okay, this is what you need to, make sure you're not catching anything, that you're being as safe as possible. And the thing is, the amount of stories I've heard from youth that come from very conservative households, and they'll tell me, they're like, no, I can't kiss. I'm like, why? Because, oh, well, you'll get pregnant or something like that. They're very, like something super, very crazy. And you're like, what? That's not even.
Like, that's the level of misinformation that we're fighting coming from the home, where they're like, you can't even kiss. You can't even hold hands because that's the sin. And then it's like you're feeling ashamed. So then, of course, when they're exposed to different perspectives, they might just be fearful and not want to challenge the perspective of their parents and challenge their parents. But it's gonna happen one way or another.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Kids grow up, they start getting curious, they start learning. And if you as a parent, the way I look at it is, my daughter doesn't feel safe to come to me and ask me questions and make sure that I'm giving her the right information, not trying to learn from somebody else, then I've failed as a parent. Because I want her to have that trust in me. And I know that mothers and daughters, you're always going to fight, but like ultimately I want to be that person that she trusts above everyone else, that she knows that whatever information she's getting from me is accurate, is unbiased, is going to be the best for her, that I'm going to make sure that she learns the best way she knows how.
Yeah.
And for my son, that's going to be a different perspective. My son is autistic, so his way of learning is very different from my daughter's way of learning. So those are things that you need to adjust as they get older. So like, I have a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old. 5-year-old, he's living in his own fantasy world with Roblox and everything. But my daughter's getting older. She's starting to, kids, as they get older, you get crushes, or they have crushes on you. And then it's like, it's a whole very cute thing, but it's also like, make sure that you trust me, that when you're uncomfortable or something happens, or if you have a question, you come to me. And then that's where I feel like I'm doing a good job as a parent, if she has that trust in me as her mom. So
I think so. One of the questions that we asked is, what can we do for teachers to do this, is bringing outside organizations. So Tiffany is one of our ambassadors. She worked for Safe Schools South Florida, and now she has a new role that she's going to be going. She could go to schools, and what would you be doing?
I will actually be talking to teenagers in the community and basically just getting to hear their story, hear what's going on in their lives, hear what they are experiencing in the four walls of their institutions. And, just basically trying to be that voice for them, because it's very, like, you always see it whenever there's like a town hall meeting, or you see these young people that are wanting to fight, speak and talk about what's going on, but no one listens to them. They're not really listening to them. They're kind of like, oh, but you're a kid. You don't really know what's going on. But it's like, the fact that they're at a town hall meeting on a day that nobody very rarely do you see a lot of people at town hall meetings, and they're there talking about their experiences, telling you this is what I think should change, and you're not listening to them. Of course, it's very frustrating for them, and it's like if you need an adult face, then fine, like let's put adults in front, but we're also going to be just reflecting back what they're experiencing to them. And I mean, I'm very looking forward to getting to be with the youth and just seeing, what school is like again in a very whole different perspective. Like, I never went to school during a pandemic, but there's so much to learn from them even now. And I hope that my programming, like of Tiffany Explains It All, that again, my programming in that I get to talk about pop culture like shows and anime and movies and historical events and people, and getting to give them that little bit of that information of that queer history, but in a fun, lighthearted way that I feel like is even better, like approachable for people who maybe are hesitant, that don't want to talk about it, but if they see it, that it's like, it's not something so scary. Like, we like the same things. Like, we like the same movies. We even like the same movie stars that are a part of that community, And I think it's just trying to give that approach of like, it's not as scary as people make it out to be. It's actually, like, you would be very surprised how normal it is, because that is somebody's normal.
Yeah. It is so normal. I've never understood the perspective of trying to other, and I mean, it's just the way that I am, where it's like, I've never felt like, why are we othering anybody for any reason? Unless you're trying to actively harm me or harm my family, then why would you other? Why would you
because of fear?
Yeah, that's exactly.
Fear,
and this HB 11 vote happens precisely because of that fear, because of that fear of retaliation, because of that fear that, like, these organizations that are well funded and pushing out this misinformation, you're scared because they put they're very easy to put a target on your back and be like,
I heard it recently, and this is their last hurrah for these people. They see that society is changing, world is changing, and they're like fighting tooth and nail to stop it. So they're putting out all this information to kind of prevent it, because they know that what's coming, the generation that's coming, the Gen Z, the younger kids, that they grew up with, my nieces and nephew grew up with an out uncle who has a partner for 20 years, or husband now because we got married, for 20 years. And for them, this is just my uncle. It's not my gay uncle, he's just my uncle. And this is my other uncle, and that's what it is. So they grew up with this. So they're going to be out there and they're going to be voting. So these people who are small numbers with a loud voice, because they're a minority. And because they get a loud voice, they seem like they're a lot. And they're not, and that's what we, as the majority who support this, have to get louder, because they're just loud, and
they're very loud.
They're very little,
and they want to intimidate.
Yes.
Their goal is to intimidate and to make us fear using our voices, because they want to drown everyone out. And like you said, this is like the deep, like, last gasp of them. They're throwing everything they can to the wall and see what sticks. That's why we've had Roe v. Wade be overturned. That's why we have Don't Say Gay. That's why we have all these like tiny little things that they're trying to, like, just crumble the wall little by little. But we have to understand that collectively, the majority of the polls show that the majority of Americans support LGBTQ.
In both parties,
in both parties. Both parties,
across the board, regardless of Republican, Democrat, Independent. They support these issues.
And it's just this vocal, very, like, they're just using intimidation tactics, and it's very unfortunate because it works to a certain extent.
So one of the things that teachers can do, or schools can do, is, so we may not be able to invite you to our classroom, but we can definitely invite you to our club. And so teachers can reach out to whether it's PRISM or Safe Schools South Florida and say, hey, Tiffany, can you come and speak to my Gay Straight Alliance? And Tiffany, you can come, and that's how we can give that information. So while guest speakers in classrooms are kind of not too much of a thing now because of a rigid schedule in a lot of topics, because English has it, and social studies has it, and science has it. We have all these exams that we have to do. Things can be done extracurricular. Things can be done during lunchtime. Things can be done after school, and we can invite these guests to kind of educate our kids on what they can do, whether it's finding information, how to get involved politically, or how to change things, how to engage them. So that's how organizations can help out. And that would, if teachers knew that, if sponsors knew that, and they knew who to contact, I think that would help. So,
Those are some valuable tips and resources, and I hope our audience takes notes. Armed with the right tools, we can all become agents of change. Now, let's take a moment to look ahead in our Future Outlook segment.
We've traced the history and dived into imagined but realistic scenarios of present-day experiences, and explored a gamut of tools and resources that can be leveraged and combat misinformation about LGBTQ issues in education. So what comes next? Let's gaze into a proverbial crystal ball and consider the future.
One optimistic trend is that young people today are generally more open-minded and accepting of LGBTQ plus individuals than previous generations. There is hope that with time, these attitudes will permeate into the policy-making echelons of our education systems. With that said, the pace of change is frustratingly slow for those who are living through the difficulties now.
Technology, too, will be an increasingly important player as digital platforms continue to evolve. The possibilities for both disseminating and debunking misinformation will grow. This double-edged sword means that education needs to keep pace and ensuring that students can critically evaluate digital information sources, especially those that discuss LGBTQ issues.
Legal changes are also on the horizon. Several states are pushing back against anti-LGBTQ plus curriculum, and the court cases challenging these policies could set significant precedents. However, as we've seen in the past, backlash often follows progress, and victories in the courtrooms don't always translate to immediate change in the classroom.
Let's also not underestimate the role of activism and student-led initiatives. Going back to our fictional Florida high school, we can imagine that students will continue to find creative ways to pull information, question the system, and demand change. They may launch petitions, organize school-wide events, or even collaborate with national campaigns aimed at fostering inclusivity and combating misinformation.
So looking forward, educators and students alike must not only adapt but anticipate. We need to prepare for upcoming challenges and be proactive in creating a more informed and inclusive future for everyone, especially for the LGBTQ plus community in educational settings. To our panelists, as we close this episode, I'd like to ask, what are some potential challenges you foresee in the near future regarding LGBTQ plus education and combating misinformation? Panel, let's delve into the future outlook. Over to you.
So for me, the biggest challenge that I see for the future of our society is going to be the rise of the continued rise of artificial intelligence and the rise of platforms that can do image manipulation and now even video manipulation. You know, there's something interesting. I followed this writer on Instagram, and he wrote this whole article on what's been happening at Burning Man. And, you know, if those who don't know Burning Man, there's been a huge flooding, and there's mud and stuff like that, right? But there's this misinformation campaign that was launched that said that there was an Ebola outbreak at Burning Man. And that the CDC was responding, the military was mobilizing, and people believed that. People believed that there was an Ebola outbreak at Burning Man. And you will see the pictures, and the pictures were a lot of them were altered. They showed tents outside of Burning Man. And he made a really good point. It's like right now, yes, you can look at those pictures, you can see the Ebola outbreak, you know, okay, right now it's not as bad. But a year from now, they'll be able to produce video that shows the military actually mobilizing and coming into Burning Man. And you'll see more and more, it'll be grainy, it won't look good, but How many people are actually going into like, oh, let me look up this video. It looks grainy.
And how
This
many
is real.
deepfakes do we not see on Twitter?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the deepfakes are only going to get worse. So you have,
They're going to get better.
they're going to better. Yeah. It's going to get worse for us, better
But better
in
for
technology.
better quality.
Unfortunately, our government or regulators are slow to catch up. So,
Right.
those things are happening. So things are not, there's no regulation saying you can't do this. You have to put a little disclaimer, like this is fake. This is not real. This is, made up. And we don't have that. We don't have those laws in place to protect misinformation because, like I said, no one's going to, everybody's, oh, I saw it on TV. This has to be real. I saw it.
But this is where the classrooms are going to really become a place where we can filter a lot of this. And it's, yes, it's going to be up to teachers to not only learn these platforms, but also creatively encourage their students to go deeper, to not just believe what they see as fact, but become this person that continues to ask why, is this true? I don't know. Let me look at it myself. Let me find the tools that exist for me to look this up properly. And maybe it's as simple as just giving them at the beginning of the school year a list of websites they can go to counter the misinformation. Like or put it up on the board, put it up on the screen, put it up somewhere that has like not everything you read might not be true. Here's where you can go and check it out. Here's a website you can go and look at this. Don't trust Wikipedia. Trust this source. Just teaching kids how to do their own research. Because I think that's important, and it won't happen Vivian is very lucky. You're very fortunate, and what you're doing is great. But not every parent is doing that.
The ability to do so, and it's a lot about media literacy that has to come from the schools, teaching kids how to discern and figure out what social, like what accounts, what newspapers, what news organizations. And even then, you still have to do your research, even if you're getting something from the New York Times, even if you're getting something from CNN, MSNBC, which are, now they have more of a perspective. But learning that, and on top of that, is not just trusting the white heteronormative news organizations, also trying to delve into to alternative news sources that represent LGBTQ or African American studies or Latinos or Latino and Latina studies and articles, so that we're not just getting one country's perspective of the news, we get everyone else's perspective on the news. But it has a lot to do with, I think, learning how to discern where that information is coming from, where you can verify that information, how you can make sure that you're not being tricked into believing something that's simply not true. So that's very important.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what you said is right. I mean, you have to, even with official media, you have to check nowadays what is being said is accurate. So if there's a quote from Tiffany saying she said this, well, make sure that you check another website to make sure that Tiffany indeed said that. And then why not just call Tiffany?
Right.
Right? What's up, Tiffany? Did you really say that? No, I mean, I think it's important.
Like it happened to you.
Yeah, with Miss
exactly.
Moeller, she's like, that's not a real quote.
Yeah.
And I learned my lesson. Don't quote my friends. Don't say that because they will betray me. Yeah. But maybe it's as simple as just having the school curriculum changed to have a whole course on media literacy.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they're doing that. And by the time we catch up, we would have lost the conversation.
I think I learned about media because I was lucky enough to be in newspaper, to be in TV production. That was more hyper-focused on journalism and using those tactics and using how to figure out what's right and what's wrong and how to get quotes, how to attribute, how to figure out how it's being attributed and things like that. So, I mean, that was my personal experience was because of that. Not everybody gets that.
Yeah, and me too. And after I did that mistake of quoting my friend, I never did it again because I felt so bad. And I couldn't write for a month. So it's like,
I mean, I feel like, yes. Do I feel like as technology is going to keep advancing, it's, again, what you just said, that's nothing surprising especially with AI on the rise, and it's just going up. There is no going back, it's just forward. So again, we're going to come to a point where then schools are going to be like this, like, is that actually factual? Like, what was really happening? Because I've had so many videos from like Instagram and TikTok of my parents sending me. They're like, "Can you believe this?" And I see it, and I can tell that it's a fake, but they don't know. And I tell them, I'm like, "This isn't real," and they're like, "No, but it is because it's online." I'm like, "That is not how that works. That is not how that works." And so like it is a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Because it is so powerful. Like I said earlier, that on social media, where you can't talk about it in certain situations, certain topics. You can't talk in like maybe group settings at school or at work, but you could talk about it online. But again, you also have people that are against the thing that you're talking about and trying to normalize that. They're like, well, because I don't like that, I'm going to say everything up the wazoo to like basically throw you off and be like, no, but did you know this? And it's like, there is, again, just that media like cognizance of just like, again, I feel like people are so easy to just believe the first thing they see and not even stop
absolutely.
be like, wow, is that really true? To go online.
Yeah.
Or
And it's
Double check.
and
Double
it's not even new. Like I had, when Malaysian Airlines went missing, I had a friend that she came and she showed me this post that had someone in Malaysian Airlines had a camera and they captured the harrowing moments of the end. And when you look at the picture, yes, you see a plane breaking up in midair. Now, Malaysian Airlines went missing at night, but this all of a sudden this plane was in daytime. And then when you look at the tail, it's like, oh, Oceania Airlines. Wait a second, this is from Lost. And I'm like, yes, and I'm like, and I told her like, this is not MH9 whatever tail number it was. It's not Malaysian Airlines. This is the plane from Lost. Like, why are you sharing this? She's like, oh my gosh, I had no idea, but she kept sharing it. I'm like, come on.
Like,
it's tough.
As a teacher who gets homework assignments from students who clicked on the first link, it's like
the advertising link,
and it's wrong, because it's just very generic information, and like I know where you went. This is not correct. This is not this is not right. I tell you need to figure out if that is the right information, or go click on a couple of things to see if this is the same information or I'm getting different information. Try and figure out, because today it's just like, maybe because it's homework and they don't care. It's just like, I just need to get it done. Click to copy, paste, move on. And that's what they do. And I was like, no, you need to put it in your own words. And so the fact that teaching media literacy and questioning what you read is very important, because they don't. They just take it as, I told my kids actually recently, because we were talking about book banning in Holocaust. And like, people and eugenics. People trust people in authority.
Mm-hmm.
I told my students, I could be telling you anything, and because I'm the teacher, you're gonna think that it's correct. Because you read it in the book, you're gonna think this is correct. You can go to a doctor, and the doctor can give you this information. The doctor is telling you this, and you say, well, that's what the doctor said. Well, that's where you get a second opinion to see if it matches. And if multiple people say it's right, okay, then go. But I think we need to do a better job at clicking other sites and not just the first one. And I'm guilty of it. I mean, I know I should stay away from Wikipedia, but every once in a while,
but you source Wikipedia.
Like, I will go to Wikipedia, and I know Wikipedia and the weaknesses, but like, all right, I just need. And so we use it, but we need to click on more sources and fact check, because that's what you do.
Yeah,
That's what you do. You fact check. I count on hats on the reports. Are like, this is the information I got. They're telling me what it is, because that's their job. And like, okay.
Yeah, but you know what? There's also like, I've seen it that people are now starting to get that second opinion in different little like subsections. So it's like, it's happening, but it's happening so slowly that you're like, okay, we need to like advance it like about maybe 20, maybe 100 steps forward, just to catch up with all the lies.
Yeah.
Like you said, by the time we catch up, we've lost.
We lost it.
And we all know that if a lie gets repeated enough time, it becomes truth to those people. And to get them to change their mind is virtually impossible. So now all those people that have been lost, like, what do we do now?
And I think that as a society, we got so caught up on trying to bring in both sides of the conversation into it. That even with climate change, we allowed one scientist to be that person that said, I'm going to go against the 99 and 100 science, I'm going to go against the other 99 and be like, but guys, it's not real. And we gave them a platform. We put them up in our news media. We started to hear about it. We allowed a certain minority part of our country to push doubt because that one scientist, who probably wasn't even a scientist, probably not even a real person, that one scientist said that maybe it's not real. And that just keeps happening across the board. And they latch onto it. But we continue to give them platforms. And I think that as a free society, yes, you can say whatever you want, but you shouldn't have a national platform to spread misinformation, spread falsehood.
Yeah. I mean, but it's not a new story. I mean, I remember hearing that autism was caused by getting vaccines in a certain order, and it was it's been debunked
over and over
again, and people still no, I can't get these vaccines in this order because what if? And there's no what if. The study was debunked, and it was a bad study. It was he used very limited information. It was just horrible. The guy was even kicked out of the medical association because of it. And so we gave them a platform. Then people ran with it. It's oh, this is it. Sorry, but no.
To this day, when my son got diagnosed, I had people tell me, "Oh, it's because you gave him a vaccine," and I'm like, "No, it's not. He's autistic because that's how he was. That's how he was born. That's who he is, and he's perfect." No matter what. And that's why, that's what people are like, oh, he can't be autistic. Look at him. He's so verbal. He's so this, he's so that. That doesn't matter. He's still autistic. Yeah. There's I'm not even going to get sucked into
that's a whole different topic. But it comes to the whole misinformation. It comes to the whole getting people to check their resources and check where they find it and, notate. So thank you for all this wonderful conversation. It's a critical juncture in our journey towards an inclusive and educated society, and your thoughts set the stage for meaningful action.
Wow, what an enlightening and impactful discussion we've had today. A big thank you to our incredible panelists for sharing their insights and expertise. Conversations like these are the first step forward, fostering a more educated and inclusive society.
But remember, the conversation shouldn't end here. We all have a role to play in ensuring safe and supportive educational environments, especially for the LGBTQ community. So let's keep the dialogue going. If you're inspired by what you've heard today and want to dive deeper, you're urged to continue your own research, connect with organizations that resonate with you, and most importantly, engage with the people around you, because knowledge is most powerful when it is shared.
Don't forget to follow and subscribe to Safe Schools at Safe Schools 1991, so you never miss another episode of the Rainbow Roundtable. If you have suggestions for future topics that you'd like to see us tackle, please feel free to send your ideas to roundtable@safeschoolsouthflorida.org. We're always eager to hear from you.
Special thanks to our partners Happening Out Television Network and their continued support for making this platform possible. So until next time, let's all be rainbow warriors of wisdom in our communities, empowering each other with the tools to foster understanding and disseminate this misinformation.
With what is happening in our schools to our teachers, school boards, and especially our students, we hope you will support our nonprofit mission to stand up and educate our community. We ask you to support Safe Schools' mission in sharing, voicing support, volunteering, and financial support to propel our mission.
That's why we invite you to tune in next month for another round of enriching conversation. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe. Remember, in diversity, there is understanding. In understanding, there's unity. And in unity, there's hope. See you next time.